everyone, how's it going? I appreciate you checking out my second installment of model kit reviewing. Today we will be looking at the adorable cat-footed robot called the Tank Nacchin? I'm not sure on the pronunciation, but this is one of a few variations of this model which, from what I can tell, are essentially different color schemes, weapons, and if they follow in this kit's footsteps, waterslide decals. The one we have today is apparently the prototype, and I chose it out of the bunch because I was really digging that beige white accented by those orange shoulders. And I can tell you right off the bat that there will be more of these guys added to the collection because this was another blast of a model kit from Kotobukiya. Now, looking at the size of this box, it's about that of an Endless Waltz Master Grade or a larger high grade. The artwork itself seems to be in some sort of paintball event, though I was actually able to find out about both who the designer is and the lore for it after checking out the Koto US website, and it seems a lot crazier than a paintball fight. Apparently the GSDF Type 07-3 Tank Nacchin is an original character created by robot designer Moi, and the story goes as follows.
Year 2090. Not long after the rapid development of AI, the line between humans and machines was almost indistinguishable, and technology to predict the future was taken for granted. The Japan Ground Self-Defense Force, or JGSDF, was the first to equip a new type of autonomous tank with a highly accurate future prediction AI.
Apparently the different variations of this kit are actually the same unit, as Unit 6 was called the Roku, and well, I'll leave a link below if you'd like to check out some more minor details about it, but as for what you'll expect to get out of the box, it'll consist of 16 runners. 4 white, 1 orange, and 11 grays consisting of various shades. Once again, Kotobukiya shows us which pieces are ABS in the same spot where you would find the runner's letter. There's also this pre-painted eye panel alongside a thinner black wire and a thicker white wire that is by far the strongest wire I have ever used with a model kit. Once the kit is all said and done, you'll find yourself with 99% of the runners used up, with the majority of what's left really being up to how many 3mm peg connection points you're willing to cover up. I mainly left them out as they're a pain in the ass to get out, though I do like the fact that it seemed that there are some extra pieces, one for sure being the part here where the feet attach onto, as I can see this being a potentially easily broken part. Now, when it came to the cleanup, this was closer to what I came to expect from a lot of Gunpla, where the color deposit isn't as prominent as, say, the Weird Tails. It's more of the stress marks that you'll be worrying about on the orange and the darker grays. As for the lighter grays and the white pieces, you'll find it much easier to clean up with a lot of thought put into making most of the outer armor undergated. When it comes to the nipper comparison, the difference between the two sets of god hands is, as expected, with the more expensive pair leaving cleaner cuts and taking up much less time when it comes to sanding and filing, while the other pair will leave some pinch marks and a rougher surface. But once you're finished constructing everything that comes with your bipedal mecha cat thing, you'll find yourself with an extra set of shoulders, a sort of headpiece backpack that has 2 3mm connections on it, a radio that slots into one side, 3 extra eye slots, 4 sets of double-sided 3mm pegs, a little baby stand, 2 holding hands, and 1 gun that looks to be some sort of SMG, but it'll be able to take on several configurations between the extra parts that come alongside it. Breaking that down next, we have a little 3mm peg attachment. There's 2 separate segments you can add to the front of the gun in conjunction with one another, though if they're like mine, you might find them falling off fairly easily. Speaking of which, those 2 clips I mentioned before never want to stay in place, so I just left mine out, and it doesn't really make much of a difference. 2 different stocks, 2 accessories that can be placed on top, with a 3rd piece that's a little more flush and out of factory looking. There's also this set of parts that, depending on how you intend it, could be a cord/hose to a battery/tank, that you can attach to any 3mm spot, and it gives you an easier time accessing that by allowing it to swivel in either direction where it's attached. As for the holding hands, I'll be brief with them as I'll mention more about them later on, To swap them out, you just remove the top half of the hands, and in their place you'll have the basic sandwich around the handle sort of grip, and seeing as how these are the only ones across all the different kits, you will always have to deal with that trigger finger being slightly more pronounced than the rest. Now, looking back at those water slide decals I briefly mentioned before, I actually thought they were just normal stickers at first, and as one might imagine, that kind of messed up the one I was trying to get off, of course. It led to a bit of crumbling on my error one, ironically enough, but I did have a faint idea of what to do. I just didn't have any center or other products for making the process easier and a better looking final product, but between putting them on the wrong side and just how they turned out as a whole, let's just say this was mostly a learning experience and my first encounter with water slides as a whole. But they took quite a bit of abuse and still ended up looking pretty good. Again, this is my first time actually working with these, so I have no real comparison of my own, but based on reviews I've seen, yeah, I'd say these hold up pretty damn well. Now, shifting over to how the actual build went, I'd say I had about the same experience as a larger high grade. The part and color separation are pretty good, though this guy did feel a little bit pricey for his size. In the end, it does have some cool gimmicks and included water slide decals, so I can't really knock it. Just know that you'll be paying about $10 to $20 more than your average high grade, depending on which variant you get. Now, as for how well the kit can move, it's a hit in some areas and a miss in others. The legs are pretty great, but the arms/hands seem to come just short of what they could be. The shoulder's range of motion is just barely there, and when we look at the piece that connects it to the body, you'll notice here with the ball looking piece that the joint doesn't rotate. It has these two tabs that prevent it from spinning, so the only motion you'll actually see here is it turning left to right, while the peg itself can move up and down. Attaching the two together, you can see it's really not anything amazing even after opening up what little the shoulder offers to make more clearance. When we move on to the hands though, it reminds me of the Weird Tales, where just the whole section here is just like, damn, you can get some pretty good poses out of this, but I wish there was just a little more to it, because essentially the arm and hand turn into this wrist-elbow combo, which looks good aesthetically, but the way it's incorporated only allows for the arm to rotate. What we can call the elbow does have a 90-degree bend. It's just, I don't know, it feels like everything on the arm just falls a little bit short of what it could be. The fingers here are on a ball joint and have only one point of articulation, so they'll always have this extended look to them, which does the job, but as soon as you try to make a fist with them, yeah, you can see this is where everything but the thumb struggles to get it right. Maybe we could do a thinking pose, but their overall reach is just pitiful, which is a shame when the thumb has such a free range of motion. Now, as for the wrist bow itself, it can only bend forward. You can't get any sort of rotation like other wrists while it's bent, so you will be completely relying on the rotation from where it connects to the shoulder. Now that it's together, you get the full 360 degrees of rotation if you give the hands enough clearance, but from there, even if you remotely try to get it in a T-pose, you can see that we're really not working with much here, and moving the shoulders up barely helps in truth. Pulling the arms up and out front, we can see just how far it can reach in and outward, which still isn't anything crazy, but I just wanted to show that you'll really have to rely on where the arm is facing to get the most out of your pose. For this next part, I'll be removing one of the legs to give you a better look at the piece that connects it together and the wheel well-like side skirts that they sit under. In addition to that, this guy literally has a spot for taillights and a license plate, so yeah, I feel pretty safe calling these wheel wells. Anyways, the joint that connects the legs are comparable to your average high grade, though I must say that this both looks and feels delicate, so I'd handle it with care. As for the side skirts, they can tilt up and down, while the amount of rotation they get is pretty nice. You can get a little bit more towards the back than the front, but what's cool is if you extend their legs forward like this, they actually have a perfect gap between the leg and the body for it to fit behind. This makes it to where the legs have most of their range of motion available, even if you don't move the side skirt out of the way. I guess I also decided to show off just how strong its tail was right here by trying to support the whole kit's weight underneath it. But anywho, though simple and small, these legs have a pretty good range of motion, and despite the arm's lack of articulation, these guys can actually achieve quite a bit and pull off the splits fairly easily. A part I really like here on the legs is this sort of flap that folds down to make room for the thighs, and it can help it achieve that 90-degree bend that you'd want out of most legs. And if you hold it in place, you can get a better idea of just how limited they would be without that. This is kind of what I was wishing they would have done for the wrists. That way you could bend them forward even if it was just a slight amount. But as for the legs, all in all, for how small they are, they do a great job. Down here at the bottom half, this whole segment can rotate all the way around without any issue. And when it comes to these adorable little paws, they're on this tiny peg that I showed the spares of earlier and are so much better than I expected. Like, for real, once these are on, you can move them pretty far in either direction. Moving too far will eventually have them slip off, but you really have to be pushing them to actually get them to pop off. Now, the range of motion it has in both directions is pretty impressive. I'd say this dude would actually have a decent chance in a limbo contest if his shape didn't screw him over so badly. But yeah, the last thing I'll mention is that I didn't do a great job of showing it here, so I will just mention that there is a hint of side to side, but really only when they're completely centered. They'll practically come off every time if you try to rotate it while facing them in either direction, but that's all there really is to them. Moving over to the head and body, we have two moving segments to the head itself. Pulling this up will give you access to the eye section, which I'll go ahead and take out for now. Once you swing it forward, you can see the inside of the kit, and opening this back hatch will give you a little bit more clearance. After turning on the flash, you can see the inside of this has a fair amount of detail to it and how these little swing arms work. Back to the eye section here, it does move forward and backwards in an attempt to help make it easier to put the eyes in. However, it usually just gets pushed back down in the process, though it's still nice that it moves in case you wanted to put it in like a repair mode or some sort of damaged state in a diorama, display, etc. As for the actual range of the hatches, the arms used for the front ones extend further out and are able to rotate back and forth, while the back ones do the same thing more or less to help fit it all together seamlessly, but in reality they don't do much outside of their intended purpose. Just a heads up though, when you're pushing the front half back, I'd recommend to make sure the two arms are being pushed down evenly or it won't close properly. The back half, on the other hand, always closes without much regard for the angle or anything, but as a whole, I'd always recommend approaching your kits with a delicate touch. Also, in case anyone was wondering, the SMG does fit in there, but I wouldn't expect much else to go alongside it besides the eye plates. Lastly, if you grab the top and bottom halves and slowly pull apart, you'll see that we actually have the ability to get some body in its movement. Technically, it can only rotate this far left and right. However, as I was writing this, I kind of realized that if you just pulled it out ever so slightly, that you could easily get that full 360 degrees of motion, so I went ahead and recorded that real quick, but if you press it down all the way, you are liable to break something if you turn it past here, though all in all, the movement it's not anything to be amazed by, but it will help you make your character look around, especially if you don't want to mess with the water slide decals that help the eyes look left or right. Now, before I get to the glamour shots of the video, I'm going to briefly touch up on some size comparisons. I am actually not sure why I didn't just use my strike or heavy arms, but grab the roommate's entry grade RX-78 once more, and because I didn't want to disturb anyone's poses, I may have also incorporated his Master Grade God Gundam, because he was the only one who was in a somewhat standard pose. And yeah, this is not a big kit by any means. However, I feel that doesn't take away from how fun it can be, especially as we begin to cover this next part. Now, with this next part, I do have to give a big ol' kit bash at your own risk disclaimer, because once this was all said and done, some of the parts that were not loose and floppy were when returned to their original owners. Despite that, if you are willing to give up some spare parts, this is where the Nacchin puts the cat in Catalyst, as it's a very similar regard to the mobile Haro worker. Out of box, the Nacchin has 17 potential 3mm holes that you can use to do anything from a minor upgrade to turning it into a mecha assimilating god of ridiculous proportions, and oh boy, we'll get there. Hell, I wasn't even done building it before I started just slapping on more and more things because I was just having such a blast. Now, of these 17 mentioned 3mm holes, I did cover up a few, and they're a bit difficult to get back off, so the end result could have been a little bit crazier if not for that, but essentially, here's how my Nacchin evolved. First, I started with the entry grade strike, and y'all, these arms look like they were made for it, and will actually fix some of its articulation issues, so if you're willing to sacrifice one of the cheapest and most available kits, it would probably be one of your easiest replacements, and you'd even still have a pair of 3mm holes on the arms. As for this next part, I both am and am not skipping ahead. I just wanted to cover how using other legs went in one segment, as it was something I did more for testing purposes, and as I figured, this is where you'll be at a much more of a hit or a miss with compatibility. Now, my first attempt was to use the fake new Core Gundam legs, and it was close, but just not something I was comfortable forcing. However, the heavy arms and strike legs both worked pretty dang well, and stayed on without any issue, though the strike legs were much tighter, and I would recommend either sanding the peg or making more room if you want a full-on Nacchin Strike Gundam kitbash thing. Now, it was spoiled a bit by those last shots, but on a whim, I actually tried and successfully got the high-grade heavy arms Gatling gun to fit on both arms of the entry-grade strike. From there, I kept it incorporated in the design because it just felt so right before I eventually added its fully loaded gun back into its default hand. After that, I turned the leftovers into sub-arms with my Barbatoros' longsword in one hand and the Strike's beam rifle in the other. But oh, we're not done there. After that, I brought back the Nacchin legs, added the Gushion arms to the legs, and this was good, but I knew I could do better. So I went ahead and lowered the heavy arms to replace the leg sub-arms, and grabbed a pair of double-sided 3mm pegs to throw on a pair of Adar's arms. Anyways, the end result was this insanity. Now, if this still wasn't excessive enough for you, you could always throw on another arm or shield with the tail, drill in some holes for more backpack extensions, etc. But yeah, this thing was just such a blast. Now, of course, when it comes to normal holding hands, not all weapons are gonna work right out of the box, but I managed to get this guy to hold a weapon from almost each line of Gundam. The ones with flat segments being the easiest to pull off, of course, and there's practically no jiggling if you get a good fit too. Now, in all honesty, my preference is torn between how it's supposed to look and how it looks with one set of sub-arms. As for the legs, I could totally understand if someone would prefer to replace these as they don't have the best sense of balance. I, on the other hand, am going to stick with them because I just absolutely love these little paws, and it really just shows you how limitless the potential to this kit is. I mean, how often is it that you can't use everything that's included with a kit? With this thing, you can incorporate some of your leftover parts, or if you just want to go around the house grabbing whatever you think looks cool, you can go all out. Either way, despite the drawbacks with the arms, I really think that this kit is something most people would enjoy, as there's no fitting issues, it has great color separation, and is just overall something unique that will stand out from the rest of your lineup. So, all in all, what did y'all think of the Nacchin? Is it something you'd consider adding to your collection, or would you rather pass on it for something else? At the end of the day, there's some small improvements I could ask for, but this kit seems like it could be great potential for any skill level of model kit enthusiast, and or a way of getting someone exposed to model kits without necessarily having to build Gunpla. Again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Nacchin and or any feedback for the videos themselves. Thank you again to everyone who watches these. Take care, have a wonderful rest of your day.